I'd love to start off and just hear from each of you what working on a Terminator film meant to you, what the Terminator films from back in the day meant to you know, the defining of your careers.
I was, I think, 15 years old when Terminator 2 came out, and I remember I went down to the movie theater. I bought a ticket for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and then I went into Terminator 2, and it blew my mind. And then I bought the VHS tape, and I wore it out. So yeah, Terminator 2, Aliens, both those movies, totally cast a big shadow into growing up and my obsession with movies, and so it was kind of an incredible trip to kind of work on something that was a direct tie-in to the kind of mythology of this movie that I kind of grew up on.
And how about for you, Matt?
So a little bit of nostalgia for me was Terminator 2 was the first rated R movie I ever saw. And in theaters, I was like 5 or 6 years old. My dad took me. Mom was out of town.
Dad's a
I
maniac.
don't know about those
Mom was
parenting
out of
choices.
So when I first heard that, hey, you're going to be working on a Terminator movie, like if I could look back and tell my 5-year-old self that, I mean, it was pretty cool. So, and to work with Tim and Julian and everyone, it's definitely awesome to go and say that. So.
In terms of Terminator, same thing. First R movie. I remember I was in Flint, Michigan, and my dad took me, and it blew my mind. And kind of the same story here with the rest of these guys. And if I could actually look into the future and realize that I was going to work on the sequel to that movie, it's pretty incredible.
And so how did that weigh on you when you guys started in on this process of like what a undertaking I'm sure that you knew this was going to be?
Well, I think we just when we were making this, we just kind of wanted to there's just kind of a feeling that those original Terminator movies kind of produce in you, and we just wanted to kind of try to do as much as possible to kind of bring that feeling back into the movie we were making, without slagging the other sequels. They didn't really feel like Terminator movies to me, and so we wanted to kind of get that sort of that sense of relentless pursuit and the heart and all that kind of stuff back into the movies as well. Of course, having Linda Hamilton involved. Yeah.
So we'll get into a little bit more of the details, but this was a huge undertaking. I mean, not only the number of sheer VFX, which is very obvious, but we'll talk about that a little later, but also making a Terminator that has so many fans looking for something great. And what gave you the confidence to make a movie of this magnitude and use Premiere Pro? That's the question I have for you.
I'll answer. I'll take the first part of that one. You can't go into this thinking you're going to do anything that matches Terminator 2 or the first Terminator, even though it's a sequel to it. You can't. First of all, I'm not Jim Cameron. I'm not as smart as Jim Cameron. I'm not as accomplished a filmmaker as Jim Cameron. But secondly, you can't go back in time and recover those feelings about the 90s and those big movies and those blockbusters with the same kind of nostalgia. So none of us went into it with the idea that we're going to make something better to Terminator 2. What we wanted to do was continue the story of Sarah Connor in a way that it hadn't been done before, mostly because Linda hadn't come back, and also because you didn't have Jim there sort of guiding the franchise and putting his stamp of approval on it. So we wanted to make something worthy, and that was really the goal. Secondly, we all want to have a good time at the movie theater, and I feel like we could deliver that. We did it on Deadpool. Everybody had a good time. And I felt like we could do that again, while, again, not meeting or matching, but at least coming close to, the feeling that you got from those first two movies. That was the goal.
Should I handle the
now
Adobe
now
part
you
of
go
it?
to the now you go to the editing.
Thank you,
Definitely
Julian.
avoided
Thank
the
you.
whole Adobe question.
I will say, well, the reason I'll set you up. So when we were getting ready to do Deadpool, I'm friends with David Fincher, and Fincher had just gotten through the whole process. You guys know this story. He had just gotten through the whole process with Premiere, working with them to make it a better film editing tool. And he said, "Dude, you got to use Premiere, or else you're a little." Well, he used a different word that I'm not going to say. And so he shamed me into using Premiere. No, actually, I'd used Premiere when I was an editor. I had used Premiere, and so it wasn't a hard sell. So we all decided. We talked to Mike, and Mike said, "Yeah, we can do it," and we used it on Deadpool. And then in between Deadpool and now, it's gotten even better, and these guys will tell you about that.
Yeah, so basically after we finished Deadpool, which is about maybe a third the size of this movie in terms of what we were undertaking, we gave Adobe a bunch of homework to work on. So there was some kind of specific challenges that were kind of, annoying but kind of manageable on Deadpool, but would maybe be kind of sort of show breaking on Terminator. And they kind of really went to work, and they kind of got the whole shared project thing really working really well. They got the project files opening way faster. And so just a lot of the things that were kind of like major irritants or kind of things that were inefficiencies in the process, they really worked on it. And it was actually, even though the movie was way bigger, it was actually a much smoother process than the Deadpool process. So that was a real testament to the work that Adobe put into the software.
And can you tell us a little bit about what your post-production team looked like? Like how many?
We had 4 assistant
I mean,
editors.
we saw the credits, but really,
it's
like the
pretty
scope
long, yeah.
of your post team, what did that look like?
Yeah, so me, 4 assistant editors, headed up by Matt, and then John, you can comment on your own team.
I had 2 assistant VFX editors as well, so it was a pretty large scope. And then we had a post-viz team. So because it was such a large visual effects show, we had to bring in a bunch of artists that would do basically temp VFX. So when we did screenings, everyone could understand what was going on. And so we, at certain times, we probably had 20, 25 post-viz artists on staff throughout the process. So it was a pretty big post team.
Yeah, I've never had anything like it before.
And how did you guys go about collaborating? Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Me and John, or who? Or
Across the editorial team. I mean, you mentioned shared projects. For those in the room, the build of Premiere Pro that these guys were using was a build that we were working on continually through the process of the film being made. The great thing about our rapid release cycle is that this is a version that will be in the hands of users in a very short amount of time from now. But the features that we are working on with them it's not some white glove build that nobody will ever see. It's real. But so you guys are literally working on the same project across multiple people.
I mean, this is actually one of the reasons why I was so excited to use Premiere on this, was being able to use the project sharing and collaborative workflow. We had eight people on the same system essentially going ahead and working. We had projects for every reel, scene bins for every reel. When you've got a lot of assets, you've got to have organization and media management. You got to have organization and media management, otherwise everything falls apart. So, scene bins, everyone knew where everything was. The VFX team could go ahead and find all the VFX plates that they needed to go ahead and work with. And you can always tell when someone's in a project by the new functionality of the project locking bin. So it really was smooth and efficient of how we structured everything. Every reel had its own project. Scene bin had its own project, sound effects, music, everything was neatly organized. We tried keeping the scene bins or project bins as small as possible to go ahead and keep the stability and functionality available.
The perpetual director at the end. Jeez.
I just want all these people to hear. I want them to hear.
So it worked really well, and I think the whole process was pretty efficient.
And then, John, we've been referencing all these VFX. I don't know if you guys know, but there was some VFX in this movie. I hope I'm quoting this correctly, but I think like 2,600.
Maybe that's a little high, but it's. I think at the end of the day, we ended up with 2,300, and so there was 1,900 in this film that was just shown, and there's some slight deviations with China as well. So. So massive show. I think total probably there was 2,600 shots total. So the vast majority of the shots were visual effect shots.
Do you count the ones that were done and like tossed or cut or?
No, not at all. That's just stuff that's in the final actual film. So yeah, just thousands and thousands of visual effect shots.
And so with that scope of VFX, how integral was the integration between Premiere Pro and After Effects in the way that you guys worked together?
I can take that. So as a VFX editor, one of the first things that I do when I come on a show is the editor will start to assemble the film, and then For instance, you know, with this, there was the big highway chase, and you've got the Terminator that's out chasing them around on the freeway. There's no Terminator there because it's all a visual effect. So Julian would come to me, and I would do some sort of mock-up to basically kind of tell the story. And so it's really important to me to have that integration with After Effects and Premiere, so I can just dynamically link into After Effects from Premiere and then just start working immediately. So
Before we had 40 post-viz people working.
correct, yeah. I was crazy enough to think I can do this, I can handle this by myself, and then
Your Terminator was pretty good though.
yeah. Well,
I
we
gotta
can
say
talk
that like
about that.
we're still shooting and I'm starting to get the first cuts with post viz in it, and it's just like this is like the fucking amazing post viz, and I mean it's all rendered and it's got a rendered Terminator in it, and I'm like this is gonna be great, and then John got too busy to do more, and it dramatically lowered in quality.
That was all done with various Adobe products too, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Actually, yeah. I mean, it's been brought up, so let's talk about it. Mixamo is a new member of the Adobe family. Can you tell us a little bit about how Mixamo came into play?
Yeah, so I had a little bit of time before the show, and so I was at my house, and I was like, oh man, this is a big show. Tim's a big VFX guy. I better kind of up my game a little bit. And so I started digging into some of the tools that Adobe had, and one of the tools I found was Mixamo. And it was not something that I never really focused on. But what you can do is I went onto TurboSquid, and I bought a $2 T800, and then I was able to upload this to Mixamo, and it was a huge motion capture library. So you could quickly rig it, and then you could apply any kind of animation on top of that model, export it out. I would bring it into Cinema 4D and render it out through Octane, and then comp it with After Effects. And so I remember when I showed Julian the first time, he was kind of like, whoa, I've never seen a VFX editor do this. And it wasn't, I mean, it was hard, but it wasn't insanely hard.
Be careful with what the quality level of the bar is.
Well, yeah, Matt was like, you don't want to show this to him. Matt worked on Stranger Things, and he keeps telling me about this. What is it?
It was a baloney Demogorgon dog that I went ahead and comped. It was quite comical. So John definitely outplayed me on that one.
And then another new member of the Adobe family is Substance, which I know the team at Blur used in the film. Can you talk a little bit about how Substance came into play?
As briefly as my limited knowledge can. I know it's great because if it wasn't, I would have heard a lot more bitching from our modelers and particularly the character modelers. I know we did. Blur took on the Dragonfly sequence, which is the future sequence with the cool ship that lands and the Rev 7s, which are the tentacled Rev models. And so they used Substance on both the Dragonfly model, which is pretty heavily textured because it needs this beaten, worn camo texture, as well as the Rev 7s, as well as I believe there's a lot of all CG shots in that sequence with CG soldiers and things like that. I can say that our character modeling department used to be one of the most problematic departments in the company, just because the demands of being more and more photoreal keep increasing. But now it's one of the smoothest, and I got to say it's because of the evolving tools that we get. I mean, no discredit to the artists; they have to be awesome, but the tools make it possible to get through this stuff. And it is a nice thing too about being. We did post at Blur, in case that wasn't said up front, which is really nice because the editorial team, even though we were in a separate building this time, we were overflowed into Blur proper. So we had a big compositing team as well, situated partly in our editorial space, but also partly at Blur. And then we overflowed and used a lot of Blur folks for post-viz and pre-viz and everything else. So it was a nice little blending of what I did before and what I do now.
The Dragonfly sequence.
Yeah, and the whole Dragonfly sequence from scratch, which I think is particularly beautiful.
And I think we actually have some Substance team members here in the audience. So good work.
Well
guys.
done.
So Julian, you mentioned that after Deadpool that you had a list of homework that you sent back to our team. And obviously they took it very seriously. How was the process of editing the film for you? How did everything go?
Yeah, I mean, this was wow,
Horrific.
There was
Long hours.
It was an intense experience. But yeah, I would say that whatever bumps in the road I experienced were not the result of the editing software. Like I said, on Deadpool, we had, sort of things where we split the movie up into reels, and the reel would take like 5 minutes to open just because it was so enormous. And so now we could like basically open the movie in like 15 seconds now. That's like a massive, massive issue, especially, you have like a crash or something like that, like 5 minutes will make you suicidal. 15 seconds, it's no big deal. And then the project sharing thing, I mean, it's not if you're kind of working on music videos or YouTube or kind of independent films where I kind of started, single user editing is totally fine and cool. You like maybe have an assistant editor, maybe do all the stuff yourself. You have assistant editor, they probably come in at night, do the night shift or something like that. But on a movie this size, it's impossible to make it without networking the editing systems. You have to have it networked. You have to have people all in the project file at the same time. If you're going to have 2,000 VFX shots and have versions coming in all the time, you need to have people jumping in the reels, updating stuff. You have people sending stuff to sound, pulling lists. All this stuff has to happen simultaneously. You can't just have a graveyard shift and a day shift, and there's just too much work happening. So Adobe, I think, has gotten us like 90% of the way there on having that work happen smoothly so that you can do a movie of this size and have it totally work.
Yeah, I mean, for what we were throwing at the system, I mean, we had video tracks that were 10 to 15 tracks deep, with multiple VFX versions. So when John and Tim and everyone would be in VFX reviews, they could look at old iterations. We were doing Lumetri effects throughout, which is basically color corrections throughout the entire timeline, using Red Giant camera shakes because Tim and Julian loved their camera shakes throughout everything. So we were really pushing the systems to the max. And on Deadpool, if we had done that, it would have been a little bit more sluggish and whatnot. And now, I mean, it was streamlined. We never really had any issues. Playback was really efficient, and we really never had that many crashes. So it was a huge success.
Awesome. And then, John, how did you handle turnovers, VFX turnovers?
Yeah, so we probably some of you have been to various Adobe events and has seen the Dispatch demos that they've done, and so we use Dispatch on this show, and so that was our primary database of keeping track of all the visual effects. In terms of the turnover process, that was pretty straightforward. I was able to dump out EDLs out of Premiere, and then I could upload them. We used Company 3, and we used their portal system, and it was super smooth, and we certainly turned over quite a few shots.
And so what are you guys hoping that the audience walks away feeling from this film now that it's out there and in the world?
I hope they feel like it was a worthy continuation of Sarah's story, because Terminator 2 was never about John. For me, it was always about Sarah. It was always about a mother's love for her son. And really just to have a good time. I mean, I wanted to make a big blockbuster movie with a shit ton of action. And I think we delivered on that score. And I really just want everybody to have a good time at the movies and be moved. I thought the cast did a brilliant job and gave great performances across the board. And we just wanted to add a little to the mythos of Terminator. Whether they make any more or not, I'm proud of this movie. And I felt like giving Linda one more shot at finishing her story was worth all the pain.
Well, I will say from my perspective, I kudos for female characters that aren't just mothers and girlfriends. Yeah. Okay, so I'd love to open this up to questions from you guys. We have some people walking around with microphones, so why don't, it looks like there's one right here in the front. Oh, you're walking away from, okay. Yeah, sure.
Let me ask a question to director Tim Miller. What's your most favorite visual effects scene and why?
It was really funny, and Julie and I would talk about it. My favorite visual effects scene would be whatever scene we were working on at the moment and beginning to get visual effects shots in, because I hated all of them as we were putting them together. And then as the VFX come in, I go, fuck, this actually works. It's amazing. But I think my single favorite was the turbine fight at the end. It was kind of the last one to come together, and it has multi-parts. But if you were to put it down to the actual shot, it's the shot of Arnold crawling forward, dragging the Rev 9 as he spasms with the spike in his eye after Danny stabs him. I love that moment where she screams, stabs him in the eye, and then he drags him forward because he's all burned and meaty, and it's just nasty, and it's just powerful. I love her moment, and I love his moment after it. So it's that one. Barring that, probably him reforming after the car accident. I love that shot.
And John, what was the most challenging?
What'd you guys think of the de-aging in the beginning of the movie? Yeah, that was super hard.
I was literally sitting in my seat going like, what? Wait, what? What's happening?
You can't call it de-aging, John.
No, it's CG, not de-aging. Sorry, that's what all the press is.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it's just this
referring to.
plugin.
Yeah,
that
it's actually this new Adobe tool. It's coming in Creative Suite 2020. It's amazing.
The Irishman's confused everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, the Irishman is de-aging. This was 3 body doubles with special little head rigs, just a cap, so we could track their heads, and then it's a complete head replacement with high-res CG models. And then we also had the real actors come in, including Eddie Furlong, and did facial mocap to get the expressions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Oh, stand up. Yeah, I was just wondering. You guys mentioned some VFX had to be different for China, for the Chinese version, and I was wondering which ones and why.
Matt?
I got to deal with the China edit. Essentially, anywhere where you saw blood splatter, we would have to remove blood splatter, degoring.
Anywhere you saw blood
anywhere
splatter.
Blood splatter. You can't have blood splatter. When Gabe stabs Mackenzie and you see it come out of her back, basically cutting around that so we don't see the blade actually come through. When Arnold is all charred and gory at the very end, we basically desatted him and essentially made it just look burnt to a crisp. So it didn't have that red, wet look. And that's essentially what we had to do throughout all of the VFX anytime that we had, any kind of gory shot. So it was recutting it, trying to lose some stuff, doing new shots entirely. When Arnold has the huge wave come across him, we go to this big white light, essentially, so we don't see his skin bubbling up and dissolving. So it was a bit of a task.
So are those shots marked like throughout the process? You know that they're ones that you're going to have to address.
Yes. So
in
essentially,
versioning?
John would go in and he would note them as CH for China, and then we finished the domestic version first, and then after that we went in and finished the China version for it.
About how much longer did that add to your post schedule?
Well, we were kind of doing both simultaneously, but we ended up going ahead and finishing the China version about a week and a half after we finished the domestic version. But we had to lock the actual China edit about a month and a half earlier in order for China to go ahead and approve the edit and make sure that it could get submitted into China.
So it's actually a little different.
Yeah, it's a bit of a process.
Matt had a lot of experience doing this because he actually spent almost a year after Deadpool release
Milked it.
doing a PG-13 version of Deadpool. That they were gonna release a Father's Day special PG-13 release of Deadpool and give the proceeds to charity, which I thought was a great idea. So Matt spent a long time doing that.
I had it down.
Painstakingly.
That's like the Tim Miller ultimate challenge, like to hit Deadpool.
It
and
was.
Make it
He in After Effects, he's masking all these areas so he could turn the red blood to
I was
brown.
the VFX company for all of that Deadpool PG. So Ajax laying on the ground, masking the blood on his face and desatting it. It's where I learned how to do After Effects.
I actually liked the cut. He did the sex montage had to turn into sort of a falling in love montage. And it was actually kind of sweet. I actually liked their relationship a little bit better. It was
like a
was
true
funny.
remix challenge.
It's okay. I still need Tim to watch the China version.
Hey, you know what? When we were in China, we did the whole premiere thing, and I'm like, fucking great. I get to go watch the China version finally because I haven't watched it yet. And then they said, oh no, you got to go do press while it's playing. I'm like, fuck. I'm sorry, Matt.
Right
Deserve
here in the
better.
front.
Hi, folks. Steve from Canada. This is for Tim, and the rest of the team can chime in too. As a traditional director dealing with shots with live actors before they're CG'd, you have the ability to direct at the time, to do a reshoot in terms of how the body language would be. But when it came to the cyborg side, how did you meet the challenge of directing the cyborg's body language? And did you have help, or people would chime in on how they would behave in the film as a director?
So the question could everybody hear the question? So the question was about the difference between directing for live action with the human actors, obviously, and then the difference of how you go about directing the CG cyborgs and their sort of mannerisms and how that was done.
Well, the way we did this was Gabe Luna, the same actor that played the Rev 9, was in a mocap suit, and that was used to drive all the skeletal version of the Rev 9. So every time you see him, or nearly every time, there maybe were a few instances where we animated him after the fact, but I would say at least 90% of it was actually Gabe on set, acting out both parts. I think the only part on the highway we had a stunt guy in a mocap suit, because you saw both of them there at the same time. And maybe for a beat or two in the turbine fight was a stunt guy in a mocap suit instead. But I direct them just like I direct any actor. I've directed a lot more mocap. Well, maybe not anymore. But I've directed a lot of mocap because that's primarily what I did before Deadpool. So I'm quite comfortable with that, either whether it's on a mocap stage or on the set.
Real quick over here.
Okay. Hi. Hi.
Oh, I thought the color looked absolutely fantastic, and I wanted to ask.
Can you hear me? Oh, yes.
Well, you'll go next. We got time. Don't worry.
So, regarding the color fill of film, when you guys were starting the process, did you guys go in with any specific look in mind? And throughout the process, did you guys finish in 2K or 4K?
We had temporary LUTs that Ken and I set for all the major scenes before we even started shooting. So we used those temp LUTs most of the time. I think in a few cases they were a little dark, and then we tried to bump them up a little bit. We retransferred, I think, some of the border crossing stuff because it was a little dark at first, and then we went back in DI later, and we did a fucking marathon 3 weeks of DI at the end of the process. And I think that was about it. Matt, Julian?
Yeah, and then as far as resolution, I mean, we finished all our VFX at 2K, up-res them to 4K, and then anywhere where we had live action that was above 2K, we went in and used that. So essentially, we would be able to finish everything at 4K for the theaters.
Okay.
I want to add one thing. I don't want to forget about the Repo Rama, because that happened. Tim and Julian are big on repositioning and adding camera shake, so we labeled it the Repo Rama. That happened at the color grade as well.
Yeah, I do a lot of that. I wish.
Is that like you like punch in or to talk a little bit about that?
Oh my God, it's a little of everything. I'm a little bit of a stickler for composition, and headroom and keeping that the same. But also we do a lot of, and we did this on Deadpool too. Julian kind of got very adept at it. A lot of keyframing to help a move. Like if there's a move to follow the swing of the sledgehammer, for instance, we might go with it, or we might go against it, or we might add camera shake on the hit of it. I'd really like handheld, so sometimes there wasn't enough, and we would add a little bit more, or sometimes we'd take it away if there was too much. But we did it fucking everywhere. Which Mike Camphor knows. That's like my one critique. I hope next time is that we found a better way to transfer that to the DI, because we ended up with a pretty interesting process to do that, but it was a little painful for the guys. I'm sorry again. But we did a lot of stuff in Red Giant, which was really great, but then we had to recreate it in DI, and that was a little bit of a process. So next time you'll have that working, right?
Taking notes,
Yes.
guys? You taking notes?
We had a bunch of overscan in the shots, so yeah, there was no kind of like we would just punch in when we wanted, but there was basically a bunch of the shot that was kind of like out of the whatever the mask that we could kind of use to enhance moves.
And you were doing that in Premiere or in After Effects?
In Premiere. Yeah.
It frustrates the fuck out of everybody, but I'd say about a third of the way through, everybody goes, Okay, all right. I see. It does help. It's subtle on every shot, but it really adds up. I think.
Yeah, you won me over eventually.
And Julian is also the master of split screens as well. He's very good. So we had plenty of split screens.
Can you explain that just
Yeah,
for
so
anybody who's not
basically
familiar with
it's manipulating a frame. So you're maybe taking a performance from an actor on the left side and using a different take of an actor on the right side and splitting it. But he's much more adept at that, and he likes the cameras to be moving, and so he makes it extra.
really
complicated
challenges
for-
himself.
He's like, those are easy. The ones that are stationary, we got to have camera moves on this too. So
You
he's
should go work
really
on a
good.
David Fincher film next, John.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I think I saw
I
Tyler.
see
in the
them. They're all
audience,
right
didn't
there.
I?
I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining.
I bet-
in the Fincher movies.
Yeah, I bet they do more split screens, but at least the camera's not moving.
Okay, now it's your turn. You got your mic?
Hi. Thanks for a female empowering movie.
Where it's hard to hear you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Thank you for a female empowering movie. Very encouraging. Someone touched on shared collaboration and versioning in the Adobe package in the Premiere toolkit, and I wanted to understand, like, was it easy to remotely share clips and the whole versioning control and other people in your team participating towards this one big real edit? Like, was it seamless, like having everything on the cloud, or was it still a bit like, here, take a clip via USB or something?
We're not on the cloud because basically that would give the studios a heart attack because of security reasons. They'd think, oh, it's all going to leak online. So we're not even usually, I think we did sometimes, but we're not in theory supposed to even have our editing machines connected to the internet. So it's very...
We never did, Julian.
Never.
We never did.
Matt, you want to...
Yeah, but I mean, essentially for the collaboration, essentially what we did was we had open drives, about 128 terabytes of solid state storage where we kept all the media and the assets, all the dailies and sound effects and music and whatnot. And then we had a master project that everyone had access to. And in that master project, each reel essentially had a project. As I was saying, each scene bin had a project. So John, myself, Julian, any of the other assistants, we could all access any of that material and assets at any time. And what Adobe had created was a functionality, a locking functionality where, if Julian has Reel 1 open, I could see that he has Reel 1 open, and I could just go into Reel 2 or whatnot and go from there. So it worked pretty well. On Deadpool, we didn't have that yet. So on Deadpool, we actually did more of like a Finder level where we would move projects around on the Finder level, and that was kind of our shared storage and project locking collaboration. But it worked pretty well.
Super high tech.
Yeah, very, very simple.
Yeah, down here.
Question for Tim first, and then everyone else. Tim, did you have a specific direction you gave to Linda for the performance? Because this totally blew me away. I know a lot of times after having a character back after 20-something years, it's a disappointment, and I love Linda's performance in this. And for you guys, did you do something specific to keep it consistent and great throughout for her performance?
Well, if you knew Linda, you would know that nobody tells Linda really what to do. She had a pretty specific. I mean, we had a specific idea for this character that thankfully Linda agreed with, and she's a great actor, so she found this character really before she came to set. But then my job for all the actors is to really try and get what I need out of the moment from those actors and enforce sort of a uniformity and try and keep the whole thing in mind versus the specific scene, but so that there's an escalation so we don't modulate the emotion incorrectly across the scene. But then you end up moving shit around so much in the editorial process. It doesn't always go, at least for me anyway, as smoothly as possible. And Julian and I worked together before, so I went to the set of Mindhunter one day and I watched David direct, and directors don't often get a chance to watch other directors direct. And David did it such a different way where he just goes, and he has something in mind for sure, but he gets himself a lot of options. I'm not smart enough to do that. So I'm usually sort of heading in a direction of a performance that I want for a particular line, let's say. So Julian almost always knows that the last take is the take I think is best, and that's what he starts with. But really, he kind of then molds the performance too, because he's back here editing. They were editing in LA while we were on set, and the great thing about this editorial team, which I got like so many compliments on, like it was my fault. Over there was these guys are like a day behind me. So I'm shooting and I'm seeing the next day what I shot the day before, which is such a huge help because as a director, you realize, you know, if you forgot something, you see it. Julian would write me these notes about scenes at night if I missed something or if something wasn't quite good enough, I had at least a chance to go back and get it. And then it is really the quality of the editorial staff and the time we spend in the edit room to modulate the performance. But if we don't get it from the actor, it's not going to be on screen. That's for sure.
Matt and Julian, like what efficiencies do you have built into that process that you're able to keep so close to production?
I mean, I think, you
They
know,
work
having
a lot of hours.
It was definitely a lot of hours. But I mean, it was pretty smooth, you know. I mean, having worked with Julian prior on Deadpool, we knew what he wanted. All the assistants, we've all worked together in the past. So we would get dailies, you know, if they shot on a Monday, we would get dailies Tuesday morning. We'd prep the scene bins for Julian. He would put an assembly edit together. He would pass that to us. We would start sounding that out. If there were split screens or temps, you know, either John or myself could go ahead and work on those while Julian was still finessing the cut. And then once he got it to a place that he wanted, we'd conform everything in and, you know, we would send the scene to Tim at set. So it kind of was always, we were never in this down state. We were always constantly working and moving towards the end of the goal.
It's kind of like you know, when you're cooking and you have a lot of pots on the stove and you're sort of like, you want to get everything cooking at the same time. So you kind of like, well, I got to get this in there, got to get that in there. And so I think sometimes if you don't think about the process in those terms, then you can just kind of work on one thing and work on the other thing. And then you kind of find like, oh, I'm not feeding the other people who I'm kind of working with kind of enough stuff to kind of have them be, you know, contributing to getting through the kind of dailies or whatever. So it's partly being kind of strategic about how you kind of go through it so that I can go, okay, I've gotten through this scene, I'm passing the scene, now they can work on sound of that, I'll go to this one. And it's also like, I find when cutting dailies, sometimes you'll kind of hit a brick wall where there's a sort of a thing that you're having trouble figuring out. And then I'll kind of give myself a certain amount of time to kind of work on it. And then if I get stuck, I'll just move on because there's hours of stuff to get through. And then I'll circle back to the problem because the last thing you want to do when you're trying to keep up is spend like 5 hours kind of trying to solve something and then find, you know, your solution is still kind of inadequate and you've kind of blown the day and kind of gotten way behind. So I try to keep the train rolling forward.
But I can honestly say, as if anybody is looking to direct out there, I hear it's not often the case, which surprises me. But I show everybody shit all the time. I have these cuts come in on pics from editorial of what we shot before. I'm so excited about it. I'm like a little kid. Look at this thing we shot yesterday. It's awesome. And I'm showing it to the actors, except for Linda, who didn't want to see anything. She doesn't like to see herself. But all the other actors, I'm showing them what we shot the day before. I'm showing the other crew. And aside from the fact that it just gets people generally excited about it and they feel like they're part of the process and they can comment on it or just feel a sense of accomplishment, I think it really helps guide everybody and makes them feel like they're just working on the same team. So much so that Mackenzie, when we got to the nude scene, the cop fight earlier in the process, she's like, Tim, you show everything to everybody, and I think that's great. I know you showed the janitor if he came on set, but please don't show the naked stuff to them. Just everybody. Just show me first. Yeah.
And then Julian and Tim, how do you two collaborate creatively once, you know, you wrap production and you're digging into the
well, Tim likes
deep end.
to sit in, though he didn't get to sit in this one as much as maybe he wanted to because of the sheer quantity of VFX reviews.
Yeah, I'm in the edit bay every day. What did John called me, a grinder? Is that what you call me, John? I'm a grinder. I don't show up late and go home early. I'm there every day, all day. And we did have a lot of VFX reviews, which was annoying to both Julian and I, that I'd be in 5 or 6 hours of VFX reviews sometimes during the day. But, you know, that's kind of what has to be done. But I still spent, I mean, the first 10-week, or it turned out to be like 11-week period where the director's cut, that was really intense. The director's cut was a little longer than this movie, but it was essentially this movie, then just tightened it down. Julian and I just sit there. I sit on the couch and watch him work. And I like to look at all the cuts. Even if we've decided this is the cut that goes in here, I still like to go through. The problem with this movie was we shot so much stuff. I still don't feel like I looked at everything we shot, which sometimes we were shooting 4 or 5 cameras, and then we had 42 days of second unit. I just couldn't keep up and look at all the stuff. There's just so much shit that I felt really guilty that I just felt like I was leaving money on the table, but there's only so much time in the day. Wasn't for lack of trying.
Hello, I'm Tyson. First question for Jillian. Were there, with previs to post, were there any major structural changes to like the cuts that?
Like how closely did we stick to the previs?
Right.
It kind of probably depended on the sequence. Like I think, for instance, like the freeway chase, just through the function of when you shoot actual real cars doing things, it's kind of like it's just different, right? It's just little pieces where the car looks like it's going fast enough, and little pieces where the stunt work looks good, and it just ends up being very different from the previs. And then I think maybe, you know, it was a little bit, our previs maybe was a bit longer. We wanted to kind of compress it down a little bit. And then other things like, you know, a bunch of the C5 kind of stuff like sticks fairly close with the previs. There would be kind of some stuff where you kind of go, oh, well, this shot in the previs, like it looked really great, but when we start doing it photoreal, maybe it looks a little bit too ungrounded or whatever, like not realistic enough. So there's some stuff that just in the kind of in the world of previs kind of worked, and then you kind of go, oh, I think we need to kind of maybe change this up a little bit. But a lot of the C5 stuff did kind of translate through. This is probably something that Tim can comment on as well.
I think across all the scenes that the moments, the big moments that you see, those are almost all previs. You don't get those kind of big moments where it involves CG characters or digi-doubles or lots of visual effects without planning them. So anything that's a big moment was probably previs. And then a lot of stuff that you get that's just bonus material. Like Julian was saying on the highway, you know, you get cars out there crashing together, you're going to get a lot of stuff that you didn't plan, but is useful to use. But moments like, you know, Grace slowing down time and lining up the shots, those moments are the ones that are always there. I'd say that the hanging Humvee sequence, the underwater sequence, and the turbine fight, we didn't actually have time to do traditional previs. We did stunt viz for. And that was the same with the Grace arrival fight as well, which means we actually shot stunt people doing it. And then we handed those things just like dailies, but we either shot it with iPhones or I don't know what are the like 5D?
Like a DSLR.
Yeah, the DSLR. Yeah, 5Ds. And then we would hand that footage over just like a regular turnover, and sometimes the stunt guys would cut it, sometimes Julian would cut it, depending. And that became sort of the guideline. Because I know it seems like a huge movie and we had a lot of time, but we had so much shit to shoot, we just didn't have time to fuck around, you know?
But sometimes when you string all these things together, I guess that's also, when in the kind of previs stunt world, you can kind of have a nice long sequence and go, wow, that's great. And then you kind of go, oh, but this one goes to this one, goes to this one, and you're like, oh, there's too much action. Then you have to start kind of pulling stuff out.
The Dragonfly sequence was quite a lot. We shot with the previs was longer, and we shot a lot more than we actually ended up putting in the movie. That's when you get really creative editing.
Yes, right here.
Hey,
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Oh, that's loud. I'm Caitlin, and I just want to say
Hi,
thank you.
Caitlin.
Hi. I just want to say thank you for making such a really great movie. I was excited the entire time. And also, I just wanted to say that I know you guys like slave away during post-production, and it's kind of a fun question. I just want to see maybe like what was your guys' like favorite like late night, whether it's memorable or if it was like, oh my God, shoot me.
guys.
Well, you want to tell about the what you guys did to Brian?
Yeah, we've got a pretty good one. So we worked an insane amount of hours. It was a lot, and being in post production, you just eat all the time, so you get really fat. And so what we decided to do was kind of counter this with having a weight loss challenge. And so we did a weight loss challenge over 3 months. And Julian he's got super metabolism.
I did not participate.
He just got really annoyed because that's all we would talk about is this weight loss challenge. And there was one particular individual who was really into it right from the get-go. He was on keto and he was doing all this crazy stuff and he had balance boards. And so he was destroying all of us throughout the entire process. But his one fatal flaw was Skittles. And so one late night, Matt found Skittles scent online. And he got little infusion sticks. The stuff came, it smelled like Skittles. We put the infusion sticks up in his vent, up in his bay. And so we let it go for a few days. And we're just like, okay, we'll play it down like nothing's going on. And he would come out, you guys smell this? You guys? And he was literally Googling like what happens when you have a seizure or a stroke, because he thought he was losing his mind. So it was...
Because he'd say, "Do you guys smell this?" And we'd all go, "What are you talking about? We don't smell anything." No.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. So that was Matt kind of wasting a lot of money, but so that was a really fun time.
Great question. Okay, I think we have time for one more.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, I've always liked Blur Cinematics, and I was wondering. Right now, is there a main modeling package you use and a main renderer and possibly the lighting technique that Blur likes to use?
What was the last question? Did you say lighting?
Yeah, lighting technique along with the renderer.
I'd say, well, modeling is probably ZBrush for the character modelers and probably Max for everything else. I might be behind the times, but I'm pretty sure of that. Then we still render in V-Ray. We composite in Nuke, and as far as lighting, I think it's just the general Max tools. I'm not sure if we're lighting in Katana yet. I think that might be on our roadmap, but I don't know if they've made it into that yet.
Oh.
That's you, Tim.
There's a little bit of dick swinging when you get on set with these big actors. So the first few days of shooting with Arnold, he's testing me, right? He's the nicest guy. He's funny. He brings these guys to set with him. They're always playing chess and smoking cigars. They're super nice. But anyway, I wanted the scene where Sarah says, when this is all over, I am going to kill you. And he says, I understand. And Jim wrote that scene, and he originally wrote those lines over by the weapons training. So they did that, and they had that conversation over there. And I didn't like it there. I wanted it to be over by the van because I thought it was particularly cruel if after Sarah watches him hugging and this tearful goodbye to this family that she, of course, would never have thanks to him killing her son, I thought it had a lot more power there. So I said, we're going to do this scene over here too, because I think it's better over here. I had to shoot it at the gun range because that's the way this game is played. But I also shot it there, and Arnold said, I like it at the gun range. And I said, okay, but I like it over here at the van, so we're going to shoot it here at the van. And he goes, well, I really think we should shoot it at the gun. I think it's good enough. And I said, okay, I don't. I think we're going to shoot over here. So then we go and shoot the scene, and Linda does her line, and Arnold says, I understand. And I said, what was that? And he goes, what? I said, all right, let's go again. So he goes, I understand. And I said, okay, I see what's going on here. Well, we're just going to shoot this scene over and over again until I get what I want. So let's go. And he did it. So, because, it was a test, and I passed. But I really think that he was just fucking with me. I think that he did it with a laugh. So maybe it was a test of my sense of humor versus my stick-to-itness.
So before we end, I'd like to go back to where we started. Terminator is a franchise that's inspiring to so many people. And I'm sure that there in this audience and anybody who will watch the recording are going to be a lot of aspiring filmmakers. So I'd love just to go down the line and get any bit of advice, tip that you've gotten or tip that you would give, a young hopeful.
I'll do it. I didn't get my shot to direct until I was 50. So I know there's this prevailing attitude that, white men, it's easy for us. Well, it wasn't easy for me. I worked pretty hard to get my shot, although I'm sure most people never get their shot, so maybe it is easy. But all I can say is that the only way I got it was by staying in the game and never quitting, because if you're not playing, you can't win. And no matter what, no matter how disappointing it was, some years you just got to stay in the game, and eventually you get your chance. And I don't think it was because I was awesome. There's a lot of awesome people around. I think it was because
you're pretty awesome, Tim.
No. I'm not. That's not false humility. There's a lot of really talented people. I felt it was luck as much as anything. It was luck in being there, playing the game. So I would just say stick to it and keep getting. The more you do it, the better you're going to get. And then when you do get your chance, if luck does break your way, you're able to take advantage of it. And I'm the luckiest fucker in the world. Despite the weekend box office, which sucks ass, I still am very proud of the movie, and I feel so fortunate to have done it, and more especially to have done it with these guys.
Oh, thank you, Tim. I guess my advice would be somewhat similar in that, I edited for about 7 or 8 years before breaking into Hollywood movies. District 9 was my first Hollywood movie. And before that, I was working on little $1 million independent films and documentaries and short films, the whole kind of world you work on when you're working in low-budget filmmaking. And it really kind of came down to I was extremely lucky, but I was the guy who got kind of recommended for that job because I worked really hard. People really liked me. They liked the work I did. And so when there came time for when someone was looking for an editor for that project, they were like, you should hire that guy. And I was the name that was given. And so for sure, it was extremely lucky to be given that opportunity. But if someone had been a nicer person to work with, had done better work than me, had been just a harder worker, etc., then that person would have been the one recommended for that extremely lucky opportunity. So you can't know if you're going to get the lucky opportunity, but you can be the person who is kind of excellent to work with, and then that's your best chance for having an opportunity like that happening.
And I'm basically going to touch base on that as well. As it's a tough industry to get into, and you're doing a lot of hours. It's a lot of hard work, but it's worth it in the end. So just stay with the grind. Stay in contact with anyone essentially that you meet, because even though it is a big industry, it's small, and you don't know when your next break's going to be. So just stick with it and grind it out.
I don't have the background these guys do. I worked in the corporate world for about 10 years because that's what I was supposed to do, just coming out of college. And one day I quit, moved to LA. I was fortunate enough to very early meet some Adobe people, and I've actually gained a lot of the opportunities that I've gotten as a result of knowing Premiere. Because it is not as widely used as Avid, and I kind of became the Premiere expert, and that got me onto opportunities like this. But one of the cool things is I sat in something similar to this several years ago, and I don't think I ever told Tim this. I told his wife, and they were presenting the opening title sequence for The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which they did at Blur. And I sat in the room, all the artists were up there, and they're like, just was blown away by how cool that was, and I was like, man, someday I would love to work for Blur. And you know, 6 or 7 years down the line, I got an opportunity. So it was just, you know, just by knowing Premiere and getting recommended, and then eventually getting an opportunity. So it was a pretty amazing experience.
This was a particularly brutal process for all these guys. I mean, there was not a night that I was there at 11 or 12 that Matt and John were not there, still working, and they were many hours after I left. So I'm not sure if you want that opportunity again, John. But it was brutal, and you know, in an industry, in the VFX industry, I've seen a lot of people working long hours, but I've never seen anybody work harder than our editorial staff, and that's both commendable and sad that it has to be that way. I wished it could have been different, because I hate to be, as you know, the leader. I'm supposed to fix that shit, but I couldn't fix it for any of us on this show, because we just didn't have enough time. But these guys all performed like champs. The one thing I would add to that other thing too is that if you're an editor, or really anybody, the one thing that is most important in this business, I think, is have a fucking opinion. People that just say yes, or they go along with the flow, they don't say anything. You don't have to be an asshole about it, but speak your mind. If you have an opinion, give it, because nobody notices people that say nothing. Nobody listens to people that don't have anything to say. So you should always feel like you can put your hand up and go, hey, what if you did that? You don't get enough of that, especially coming up the chain of command. One of the best things about Julian is that he's never afraid to say, Tim, that's a stupid idea. And I value that, and I hope you never get in some position where people can't say that to you, because that's a sad place to be.
John, Matt, Julian, Tim, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And congratulations.
Thank you.